Hello and welcome, or welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. It was suggested that I do a top 10 books from my reading of 2023, last year. But I think given my quantity of total reads that trying to tease out 10 might be difficult. And so I am going to give you my top 3. That said, I'm going to cheat a little bit and tell you some runners up. There were 2 runners up that I feel deserve honorable mention. One is The History of the Crusades by Stephen Runciman. It's a 3-volume set, a perfect introduction to that historical time and place. His prose style is inimitable, I would say. His storytelling much lauded. The second runner-up or honorable mention was 10 Years of Secret Diplomacy, and that is the book by E.D. Morel, in which he talks about the secret negotiations between the colonial powers behind the back of Germany, which, in his view, set the stage for the First World War. That book clarified very much for me the political scene of the time. I have not studied the First World War, hardly at all, and I've come at it only through side angles, such as poetry or war memoirs, but he laid out the politics behind the conflict. And very clear, there's a fish flopping in the background. So I guess the reason that they do not win the top prize is owing to their nature as history. Each book was fairly well contained to its specific time period and a historical retelling. And I think for my top 3 books, I want something that's a little broader than that, or that has a little bit of a further reach than that. If you are historically minded, you could not do wrong with either of those books. But I found myself surprisingly enamored with a couple of collections of short stories. And the first one, which really bowled me over, was Night of the Living Res by Morgan Talty. And the second one was God's Children Are Little Broken Things by Arinze Ifeakandu. Both are authors that I have not read. I heard about both authors on BookTube or YouTube, and entered each of the authors' respective books without expectations, not knowing what I would encounter, and being mildly delighted in both cases. And now, it is quite possible that a measure of my delight in those books was in the alienness of the landscape, if you will. Morgan Talty's Night of the Living Res, all of the characters are Native Americans living on a reservation. And while all of the stories and the interrelations amongst characters had a very highly definitive American feel to them, the unique twist placed on the scenarios described by virtue of the unique locale and the unique position of the various protagonists just added a level of interest to the stories for me. The same can well be said for the the other book, All God's Children Are Little Broken Things, which are stories all set in Nigeria, and in one way or another touching upon gay related themes, some more directly so, others less directly so. But in both cases, the books opened up a world for me, an imaginative world, which I had never touched any kind of bases with in the past. I've only been relatively new to reading a lot of fiction, and then my background is very much traditional, reading the Brontes, reading Jane Austen, reading the British Victorians, that kind of thing. And this whole world of global or international storytellers is just a whole new vista for me. I mean, I felt something of that when I really started reading my first couple of natural history books as well. But these collections of short stories really impacted me. And I come to the form long ago being a lover of the form, having read I think everything by W. Somerset Maugham in terms of short stories, and liking them all once over, possibly many of them twice over. And that was a long time ago. And I realized that to go back and hit those again, in some cases, colonial setting might not work for me now as it did then. It's interesting to see the colonial setting turned upside down from the viewpoint, say, of the formerly colonized. And so I think getting a perspective from an author who is not a dead white male is very refreshing for one who expects to be a dead white male before too long. So I can't say which of those books deserves top place in the second place slot. So I'm putting both of those books in a tie for second. And my first place book for the year, you probably guessed it, turns out to be The Dark Horse. I began reading this at the midpoint or something like that in December, just on a lark. I had read it at age 19 and didn't get too much out of it. And I read it, and just what I liked about it was that, well, I think I used T.S. Eliot's phrase about to return to the place and know it for the first time. And so because I read this at 19, I read it and did not understand it. And if it strikes you as something that you might be interested in reading, I can tell you part of the mistake I made the first time around, which, well, for one thing, I had no experience with the world. He writes mainly about the corporation, the large corporation, and the corporate system. I had no experience with any of that. But he uses also concepts. There are two key critical concepts which he lays out at the beginning, and then the whole rest of the book is talking about these concepts in their various aspects. So one is the concept of the planning system. And when I read it as a kid, I understood that the phrase meant something important to Galbraith. I never took the next step of really understanding his concept. So if you're going to read this, you have to understand what he is meaning by that, because it's not a literal thing. It's a metaphorical usage. And then there was the technostructure. That was the second phrase that keeps coming back. And so the technostructure essentially means the various committees that meet in all these offices, in all these corporations, where decisions are made. Their objectives are discussed, and eventually some sort of decision is made. So all of these interrelated, sometimes overlapping little groups of individuals. The planning system is the system into which the capitalist system has evolved. Having a lot of capital has enabled technological investment, and then technological investment has changed the manufacturing process. So where in the past a vendor of something, a manufacturer would make something and try to sell it where he could, and if he could, he would get the money, and he would consider himself successful. But because of all of the vast outlay that lies behind products nowadays, the manufacturer cannot afford not to sell their product. He draws comparison with, say, Henry Ford. When Henry Ford built his car, he was able to build a car without any special equipment, any special material. Anything that he wanted could be gotten pretty much anywhere. He needed steel, well, he could just get steel. If a car or some kind of machine is being built today, such a requirement has grown much more complicated and complex, and relies upon a whole backlog or backload of planning which has been done, investment which has been done to lead to this product. And that is why the advertising culture that we have evolved into has become so strong and inescapable. It is not the sort of thing that, oh, you thought that Burger King is trying to fight with McDonald's and they're in competition with each other. It's not that at all. There may be an aspect to that, but actually the whole advertisement ecology exists because people have to be conditioned to buy. And there's a very lovely little passage that I would like to read to you. I think I might have quoted it in the community section on BookTube, but I thought I would read this to you just because it really is a good summation of what the whole book is about. Once it was imagined that the economic system provided man with the artifacts by which he has anciently surrounded himself in response to his original and sovereign desires. This source of economic motivation is still celebrated in the formal economic liturgy of the system. But as we have sufficiently seen, the system, if it accommodates to man's wants, also and increasingly accommodates men to its needs. And it must. This latter accommodation is no trivial exercise in salesmanship. It is deeply organic. High technology and heavy capital use cannot be subordinate to the ebb and flow of market demand. They require planning. It is the essence of planning that public behavior be made predictable, that it be subject to control. That is one paragraph in its entirety, which I thought was a marvelous distillation of the book. I'll just read you a little bit further. And from this control flow further important consequences. It ensures that men and increasing numbers of women will work with undiminished effort, however great their supply of goods. And it helps ensure that the society will measure its accomplishment by its annual increase in production. Nothing would be more discomfiting for economic discipline than were men to establish goals for themselves and on reaching them say, "I've got what I need. This is all for this week." Not by accident is such behavior thought irresponsible and feckless. It would mean that increased output would no longer have high social urgency. Enough would be enough. The achievement of the society could then no longer be measured by the annual increase in gross national product. And if increased production ceased to be of prime importance, the needs of the planning system would no longer be accorded automatic priority. The required readjustment in social attitudes would be appalling. So that was the entirety of the following paragraph, which I did not plan to read, but one thought you can see leads to another. And it's very interesting. And I decided I wanted to share that because Grix, etc., just, last week he did a video and it was on, the culture industry, as he called it. He was doing a reading of Adorno, which I was not following, but he mentioned to me something about that video, which he posted a week ago and which I only just watched. And he talks a little bit eloquently about the consumerist situation in which we find ourselves, where we have so much of any given thing, but that everything that we have seems to be the same. So we have movies coming out, lots of movies, but every movie is the same. And we have a lot of different food, prepared foods, but all the foods kind of taste about the same. And I don't know what Adorno was striving for in his argument, but clearly he was a precursor to the type of thinking that Galbraith was doing in his economics. I say with Galbraith, belatedly, I have come to know the place where I am at the same time, for the first time. Now, when I look out and I see a car driving along the road with its new needless style, the latest bells and whistles, which are a selling point, I understand now that all of this needless superfluity is integral to the system whereby our goods are produced. Now, Galbraith has tentative ideas to break the dominance of the planning system. Probably any prescriptive notions would have to be rethought for our time. He was writing initially in 1967, I believe. Now, it makes me doubly want to read his other book. Where is it? The third in his trilogy, Economics and the Public Purpose, because I believe it delves particularly into the cultural ramifications of the planning system. And so I would really like to delve into this now and finish up my reading of his trilogy. To close, I will show you a book that I just got, if I can find my scissors. Well, I don't see the scissors now, and I thought I had them. Oh, perhaps I can do it without. As other people that I know are not deterred by the most difficult of food packages, I am not deterred by anything to get at a book. This is a book I bought not really even wanting. Oh, it came from Half Price Books too. Oh, and it's marked up a bit. It's okay because it's a book I did not want. It's just, I loved the Princeton Press edition of the Galbraith so much. I thought, well, I want to see something else. I believe The Conscience of a Conservative was an important book in its day, at least for, say, those who saw themselves as conservative, meaning, I guess, Republicans. Now, back in the day, 1960, that was probably the last time you ever heard people of the conservative disposition professing to value conscience or to make some sort of assertion that conscience was an important aspect of political man. Oh, and a new foreword by George F. Will. Oh my God, this is horrible. What a terrible book. I like how he's floating on a little circle. Some of this has been highlighted. I kind of expected that, but it was a cheap copy, $5, free shipping. And the book that I would really like in the series is the Kerner Report, but that was above my price point. If I see it somewhere, I will pick it up. So that is just a brief mention of my top 3 for the year 2023. I would encourage anybody, if you are inclined towards economics, to check out this volume, and indeed this edition. This is the 3rd edition. Thank you for stopping by my channel.